with you in the space. Got it. Recording. Yeah, thank you so much. And I first want to introduce myself in my mother tongue, Dene Bazad. So yat e she Adam Basinti in a shet and Arjun in a schlet and I have basic Pashishi, Tobaha Dasache, Torachini Dasanele. I'm Adam Basinti, an enrolled member with the Dene Nation, or also known as the Navajo Nation in the southwest portion of the United States. Grew up in Gallup, New Mexico, and hopped around um, over many different states and landed here and currently serving as a tribal affairs director within the Oregon Department of Human Services. So we're in the director's office and we work with all of the five programs to ensure that our tribal nations and our tribal communities are served efficiently and effectively. And today's presentation, is going to be very much an introductory presentation and going to lay some foundation work. And it's not going to be comprehensive. There's so much to offer, but I think what today will leave you with is at least just some guidance, some clear understandings of how to engage and work with and partner with tribal nations. And so I just know that is the expectation going into this. You won't be becoming an expert, coming out of this, or it's not like you'll be able to understand, all of what it means to serve a tribal nation. And so, but again, it just at least is giving you a taste and building that foundation for today. Where I want to begin, and before jumping into a slideshow that I have, I would want to start in a good way. And starting in a good way resonates so much with a lot of our tribal people and our tribal culture and practices and protocol. And when I say starting in a good way, every time tribal people or indigenous folks, and this goes for a lot of tribes out there, but I'm also sharing my own experience, so it may not be the same, because we also have that diversity. There's over 570 federally recognized tribes, and even more that are not recognized, that we still of course acknowledge. And I want to start by sharing and offering a bit of an opening, a blessing, and I want to be able to share how I would approach, or at least just share my culture in a way so that what to expect, so that that what I am doing is something that is not wrong, or is not you're surprised, right? And I feel like how I conduct myself and how I like to enter spaces is to be able to share my culture, right? We always talk about showing up in our authentic selves. And so what I want to do is offer just a little bit of an opening and blessing, just to provide a space to where we can come in and have a positive feeling. For some, it may be stepping, using moving our best foot forward, right, as some might say. And so for Native and, like I said, tribal people, anything new that we start, anything that experience, any sort of possible dialogue or discussion that might bring any emotions, even just a gathering of people in a circle, there's always an opening in a good way. And so that's just a general protocol. And this doesn't mean that you have to lead this. This just basically means that this is possibly what to expect sometimes when you start a meeting with tribal folks. This might be something you are also asking. Hey, would you like to start in a certain way? And so I want to offer that to at least again, not only tell you things but also experience it, because that's probably one of the best ways to learn, right? Is through experiential learning. And so I'm going to offer and say some words, and feel free to pray in your own way, and however that might be. And If you want to turn your camera off as well, that's fine. I just want to offer a little bit of an opening for today before we get going. So if you wouldn't mind joining me, I appreciate it. Shimona Hassan, creator, Dean Dene. Creator, thank you for bringing us into this space today. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to have a job, to have a house, to have a family, to have culture, to be able to live another day. Each day is a blessing, and I thank you for all the gifts and the blessings I've received. And for those that are here today, we are all thankful. And Creator, they ask you to just bless us in this space today as we move through, conversations and topics that might be new to us, and that might be something that, we will be grappling with. But Creator, we ask that you open up our hearts and fill it with love, compassion, understanding, and keep our minds clear, filled with positive emotions and thoughts as we work together today to be able to serve our tribal people and our tribal nations. The Creator, just clear our path and remove barriers and challenges. And Creator, for those who are feeling ill, sick, or in need of healing, provide that health, help, and happiness, and so that you can give us the strength and the courage to keep going forward and being able to do good work in our positions and our roles and in our communities, and help us just continue to serve those that are in need and that are help of our services. But Creator, thank you for allowing us to come together again, to be able to learn together and to work as one for the benefit of the entire state and communities and our tribal nations. But Creator, thank you for again allowing us to come together. Oh, great! Thank you so much for that. I want to share that with you because it also helps me, grounds me, and allows me to also bring into this space, good intention, good feelings. Sometimes when we come into meetings, especially such as the state, we're all about business, right? We have to get down to brass tacks right away. Tribal people are not like that. Unless maybe you're meeting with a CEO of a business possibly, but I mean even then there's always that time that we take when we first gather, when we first have a group of people, especially if we don't even know each other. We take that time to be able to open up in a good way, do introductions, that sort of thing, learn about each other before we even get into some of the topics that we are needing to get to. And so I'm talking about this in general, and I don't want folks to also think that this is the way it has to be, but I'm offering just information and some ideas about how the engagement could play out, right? But again, I really just want to better inform your experience, better inform your perspective and knowledge base when it comes to serving tribal communities. Because some folks, from non-native populations, come in and don't want to make mistakes and don't want to try anything and just kind of, are just really like, nah, I'd rather not engage, and that's fine. Sometimes, that fear can overtake us, and that anxiety. At the same time, I feel like we also need to say, hey, this is what I have heard, or this is at least what I was learned through a training, and so just being able to approach it. And so anyway, I wanted to at least open with that, and so thank you for that respect, and coming into opening in that way. I shy away from a lot of religious rhetoric, because our beliefs and our spirituality are grounded into our creation stories and our holy people. We not only pray to deities, but we pray to Mother Earth, to the water, to the trees, the things that sustain us here on Earth. And so the spirituality aspect is certainly, it differs, when it comes to religion. Because I know some people, when they hear prayer and like, oh, it's no, I don't want that religious stuff, but it's not how I was raised. And so I practice a lot differently, and so just want to provide that clarity as well, because for some they think religion and the church and and whatnot. And so um so Going into today, and laying that foundation, I would like for everyone to take out a piece of paper, if you still have that anymore. I know we're working in a virtual space, but if you could take out a scratch piece of paper, so something that you could possibly discard, something that's not important. So take out a scratch piece of paper. And also, if you can, turn your cameras on. I'd love to see all 106 of you, if I can, as well, because especially if you're going to be working and serving tribal communities, going off camera, that's probably not starting off on the right foot. And so it helps. And so I do appreciate, to see faces and whatnot, because it's hard to connect more than ever. It is so hard to connect more than ever, especially, through Zoom and Teams. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And so if you could take out a scratch piece of paper and have a writing utensil, and I want you to write down the 3 most important things to you in your life. Right now, what are the top 3 most important things to you in your life? So if you can take the next 30 seconds to write that down, I appreciate it. Okay, 10 more seconds. Okay. Yeah, it's good to see, your faces and not a blackout, on the screen. What I want you to do, and I would normally do this in person, um, but I'm going to have to adapt to the virtual space. And so, what I normally do in person, I would ask you to all pass your papers into me. And so, I would do that. And so, but I want you to do this next action. So, what I want you to do is take that piece of paper and tear it up. Tear it up and throw it to the ground. Thank you. I can actually see you guys doing it. Thank you so much. Okay. So this exercise demonstrates what has happened to our tribal people, not only in this country, but across the world. Our tribal and indigenous peoples' lives and everything they have valued was disrupted, was torn apart, was fractured, and discarded. Within our history books, there are countless events. It may not be documented, it may be documented, but there is so much traumatic events that have happened to indigenous peoples, where everything they loved, everything they were connected to, everything that they valued, again, was shattered, completely shattered. And so, what you wrote on those pieces of paper were probably very similar to what our tribal people also value. I imagine family, right? Water, air, food, connection, relationship, uh, all those pieces there, were shattered and were taken away from us. And I like to start this discussion and dialogue in this fashion, so that you can at least understand, or empathize, what it might feel like for everything that you loved and valued that was on your piece of paper, what it might feel like for that to be taken away from you, to be, just thrown to the ground, to not be valued at all. So it's a good exercise to be able to feel, to have that feeling. Um, and I would want to get some reactions. And this is probably one of the best parts about it, is just to hear what your reactions are to when you had to throw the piece of paper. You can either come off mute or also type in the chat.
First comment I see, Adam, is that it was heartbreaking.
I felt sadness, grief.
Confusion, empathy.
Why would you ask us to express what's important and then have us rip it up? It made no sense.
People are mentioning that this was a powerful reminder and reluctance to rip up the things that they'd written on the sheet of paper, and a realization that the things that we have, we sometimes take for granted, but they can be taken away.
I'm sitting out.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Casey.
I'm sitting outside. So when you told me to rip it up and throw it on the ground, I was worried about it blowing away. But then when you talked about that, just had more significance and impact on what you were saying, because it was going to blow away, just kind of like all of their hopes and dreams blew away.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, for those who came off the mute and also within the chat. There is a mix of emotions, right? And someone just put in the chat, I had a conversation with my daughters about this and the other day and asked them how they'd feel. Anger is what came to mind. Anger, yeah. Yeah, there's all of these emotions that are natural to have, and is also what our people have had to this day. A lot of our tribal people, our native nations feel sorrow inside, feel scared, feel betrayed, feel angry, depressed. All of these things you mentioned, that's still carried. That's still that's a part of that historical intergenerational trauma that we carry. And there is science behind that, to where through epigenetics, all those traumas are carried into, our DNA, our blood memory, some may say, and are passed down to the next generation unless the cycle stopped. And so I appreciate everyone participating in this, and being vulnerable, because it is a powerful reminder. It is hard to tear up, right, what you put down, and connects to the purpose of what I do and our team does when it comes to serving our tribal nations. And with the pieces and how I would then move forward is, if we were in person, I would pick those pieces back up, put it back on the table, and say that it's never too late to put the pieces back together. It's never too late for us to work on what that might mean, or how do we put it together. But the act and the decision to say, you know what, we need to put this back together, because I don't like that feeling. I don't like someone else feeling that way. And I think that's one of the roles that we could play. We may not be direct healers. We may impact tribal people or nations in a different way, maybe just a part of their life journey. But if we can also come with that understanding, come with that kindness, the compassion, to be able to say, I know, I may not know everything you've gone through, but I'm just here to help. I'm here to serve. So I think this is something that I often like to start with, to frame the conversation for today and to really put some context behind it. Any questions before we move forward? I think I'll just take questions now, and then I'll then probably wait to the very end before we get to the next question segment.
I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to share my screen and go into a presentation that I have for you today. You can all see that, correct?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. As I mentioned, I lead the tribal affairs unit out of the director's office. And so our unit is growing, and we're going to be tipping upwards of 16 people, which wasn't always the case. And so we, as I mentioned, work with all of the 5 programs, especially our child welfare area. And so that's where most of our staff are dedicated to, but we're trying to expand and be able to provide support and expertise in the other areas there. And so as I move forward in this slide, if I can move it, come on. There we go. So as I mentioned, in serving our tribal nations, our team is continuing to build capacity and really develop, our role with ODHS. This whole tribal affairs unit used to be one person, and this one person just worked on child welfare issues and was working on, the Federal Indian Child Welfare Act. But somewhere along the way, we were able to note that, we need tribal perspective in other program areas, just like other citizens and other Oregonians. Our tribal people do need support from aging people with disabilities, do need support in self-sufficiency, do need support in office developmental disabilities. And so, we were able to be at the position we are now with helping and supporting, should I say, supporting our programs and our program leadership in each of the areas there. And so, we're going to continue to expand, but I wanted to share this credo with you to know, our purpose and our why, and really that vision that we are pursuing. This is just a start. I feel like at least I wanted to provide something tangible about some of what we do as tribal affairs, because after this, you are always welcome to contact us, to connect with us, to be able to ask questions, and help, especially if it comes to serving our tribal nations and our tribal partners out there. And so raising the health and wellness of all Oregon tribal communities is a big component, because we as tribal people think of things holistically. We don't think of just the physical aspect, but we also think of the mental, the spiritual, the emotional, all those things that I mentioned in that early exercise about the historical intergenerational trauma. We've been impacted in a lot of those areas there. If you look at statistics, right, we have very high numbers suicide, we have very high numbers diabetes, very high numbers, cancer, very high numbers, violence, those sort of things there, domestic violence. And so, we've been impacted in a lot of different ways. And a part of what we've been through and what we've experienced in the past, certainly provides a bit of the why and how things have turned out, but doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why things are the way they are, but certainly contribute and are variable to how things are the way they are now. And so for us, raising the health and wellness piece, it is that holistic health and wellness. It's that mental, physical, spiritual, and the emotional piece of it that I'll also want to mention. You don't just treat the physical. It's just like riding in a car with four tires, right? If one of your tires are flat, maybe the physical aspect, it's going to ride funny. And maybe say, what if the emotional aspect of yourself is also, there's no care there, right? You don't tend to that. Or even the spiritual aspect within that. If you're riding down the street and that spiritual tires, going flat, it's going to ride funny. It's going to ride crooked, right? So when we think about our health and wellness, it is having that balance, the harmonious relationships between the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional pieces there. And so this is relating a lot to relational worldview, which is a perspective that is, steeped in tribal perspective and tribal understandings of, health and wellness, and how do we maintain our health and wellness? Well, it's that balance between that mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. Now, how we go about doing that is elevation of that tribal voice, right? Of sovereignty and culture. And these pieces here are very critical, because the fact that historically they haven't always been prioritized. Tribal voice hasn't always been around the table. Tribal voice, sometimes is tokenized, still tokenized to this day. And tribal voice, sometimes there was never even a voice, right? Because we were never allowed to voice our opinions, our thoughts, our concerns, or sometimes our needs. And so for us to be able to prioritize and elevate that tribal voice is so paramount, because it's missing. And even though we are a small population, that doesn't mean that we get to be the other or to be discounted in some way. No, we have to understand that there are tribal people still living today. And I've grew up and I went to some colleges, and people thought that we were dead. And I was like, what in the hell? What kind of history book are you learning out of? Oh yeah, I forgot. TV Western shows. Sorry. And it's just very frustrating, and because of the lack of history and information that is shared about tribal people. And so being able to prioritize that tribal voice, and especially when it comes to decisions about families, comes to decisions about children or elders, that has to be inclusive. It's that same statement, nothing about us without us. Same thing here with tribal voice. When it comes to elevating tribal sovereignty, I think this is another piece that is becoming even more prominent and more important, and also still under fire. Tribal sovereignty is something that needs to be prioritized, and is, of course, allows tribes to be able to conduct their own business as their own separate nation. A lot of people refer to tribes just as communities. No, we are an independent nation there within a nation. And have that sovereignty and autonomy to be able to make those decisions. Maybe things that we can't do, maybe make money in war, but other than that, we are our own separate nation there. And so I think that is a huge misconception, and often is not offered in history books, or even just in general. But sovereignty is something that it certainly must be protected, must be promoted, exercised. And right now, I think what we're also seeing with cases across the country, legal cases, that sovereignty is still being fought for, and people want to basically do away with sovereignty, because we were always the Indian problem. And so when it comes to that word, sovereignty is not just something that you can throw out. It's not just a sexy word that tribes love to hear, but again, it's something that we must continue to promote and protect at all costs, and respect. finally, that culture piece. We as tribes and indigenous peoples have gone through so many rough patches in history. One of the roughest patches was the boarding schools, the boarding and residential schools that were basically created to assimilate us into mainstream society. Because again, we were always thought as the Indian problem. When folks came to this land, they wanted to just do away with us. They can have, the minerals, the resources, the land. They can have the property, right? And so they did it whatever cost. They pursued, and so they tried to, of course, kill us off. Genocide. Indian wars, germ warfare, and then you had relocation, right? But you also had a phase of just assimilation. It's like, well, if we can't kill them off, how about we just assimilate them? Let's teach them our language and teach them how to farm. Let's cut their hair. Let's take away their clothes just so that they can blend in, and we can go about our business. Manifest destiny, that sort of thing. And so the culture is so important because it was taken from us at one point. It was taken from us, it was stolen from us, it was forbidden. And so for us to resurrect that, to still have our culture, still have language, still have ceremonies is amazing. Shows the resilience. And is why we need to continue to elevate it. And is also something that is part of our livelihood. It's a part of our livelihood, and it helps keep us, health and well, then, it also should be a part of the service delivery system, and be a part of the integrative service delivery. And so there's the reason why, we in tribal affairs and probably others talk about culturally responsive practices, right? I always like to say tribally responsive practices, so that, the services that we are delivering to, so say, tribal families are effective because they are delivering services in the context of that culture. And so just wanted to provide a bit of a breakdown of this credo and talk about the importance of who we are and offer that purpose. And I'm going to go into a little bit more depth here when it comes to the tribal kinship structure. I have this bar up front. Does this bar, maybe I can only see the bar. Can you see the bar? Is it like in the way of the top title slide?
It's not. And I think if you click on the gray part of it, you can move it out of your way if it's bothering you.
Oh, okay. There we go. Wanted to make sure. As I'm talking about the preservation and the protection of tribal culture, of a way of life and a livelihood, this is what I'm talking about. When a child comes into this world, and within this native world, right? This is what we are trying to protect, to preserve, and to continue to promote. Because at one point, this was taken away. As I mentioned, this here was fractured. This here was separated, disconnected, and that is a travesty. Considering indigenous peoples have been here since time immemorial, right? We obviously are part of this earth and didn't necessarily travel here to this land, but we're born of the land, and have had tribal customs and practices where this child is truly surrounded by a support system and is connected to so many elements that help this child thrive. And when you're coming into this world, a child with my own traditions, Dene, a child is born usually with song or prayer, so that when the child comes out of the mother, they hear the language, they hear the ceremonies, and hear, those sacred words, that are sung to this child. Now, this child not only is connected to mom and dad, but they also have um, a family, family that extends out to so many other elements there. We value not just like the nuclear family, right, but more than that. The siblings and the aunties and the uncles play a huge role in the development of a child there. For me, I'm closer to my auntie, much more closer to my auntie than I am with my mom and my dad. But I won't tell him that, because my aunt, she was the one, that was that provided that was that connects, that sort of buffer, that buffer between my mom and my dad, in a sense to where I can still keep a strong relationship with my parents. And so she, did some of the disciplining as well, and was there for me to be that buffer. Because if you see, right, some experiences with families like, oh, I hate you, mom and dad, and I just want to leave, and that sort of thing, like that auntie and the uncle are there to prevent that, that sort of thing, and be sort of that buffer. And so there's so many intricacies about and roles that extended family members can play in the development of this child. With a tribal child, you're also connected to your clans or your bands. My introduction, I talked about the clans that I was a part of, that basically identified my mother and my father's side, and basically it is often, it is mentioned, and it is something that I always do when I meet Navajos or non-Navajos. And so other Dene folks, I definitely provide that introduction to know who your family is. And because I feel like you always have family. You may not have, sometimes people honestly don't have a mother or father, but through our clan systems and our beliefs, we have family somewhere. And so that helps us also identify families, and identify also maybe what part of the reservation you're from or area. Also identifies who you can and cannot date, which is a great thing. So it is helpful of not, of knowing, that's your cousin, can't date her, that sort of thing. And so that sort of connection, though, is amazing, because the fact that, again, it allows you to have that extended family, which is so important to native and tribal people here. And I have the spiritual pieces here, and the culture and traditions. Another, within a child's life, you go through really four major phases: infancy, adolescence, adulthood, and elderhood. And in all those areas, you have different um, sort of events that occur, and roles that you take on. As a child, coming into this world, you are still a sacred being, because you passed into the physical world here. um, there is a ceremony that happens, or an event, actually a cultural event, and for Dene people, it's called a laughing party. And so whoever makes a baby laugh first, you know, has to throw a party for the family. The baby and that person have to throw parties, and so at that party, there are gifts that are given, that the person with the child basically gives out, and as basically holding the baby, and they give out gifts, and all that is to ensure that the child grows up to be generous, to be able to grow up and have that generosity already embedded in you. And so just wanted to share a bit of like the cultural and beliefs too within raising a child. I share this to get a better understand, to allow you to understand just sort of what our livelihood looks like, right? What that support system looks like, what traditions and protocols are behind raising a child, and having the roles of different aspects of the family here. Those are all so important and everyone is interdependent within each other as well. That's a huge thing in terms of interdependency of being able to not necessarily rely on a system, but rely on your family. And I think that comes up sometimes where we don't want to go and ask for support, right? We don't want to go and ask for any TANF or something like that, or because we might be too proud. We might still rely on our family, which may or may not be in the position to take care of us, but that's also just within a value, um, and so just being able to think about that. But I wanted to share a bit of that before moving forward, and I think again this is something to know. This is my why. This is why get up every day, is so that I can continue to protect this kinship structure and this way of life that was really close to being lost or being taken away forever because of boarding schools, because of other Indian removal policies, because of relocation, because erasure and treatment towards Native people, which we still see today. But again, this is why I'm here today talking to you about, because this is what we are fighting for. This is the preservation of a tribal culture, and this is a part of that tribal culture. And so just wanted to mention a few of those things, and just to talk about that deeper significance, when it comes to serving tribal families and tribal nations. Okay. So within our state, we have 9 federally recognized tribes that we serve, but we also have over 100 nations within the Portland, Oregon area, and so those are coming from out of state, right? Usually, you have a lot more tribes represented in that urban area there, and so that one of the biggest questions I always get from folks who haven't worked with tribes is, why are they called confederated tribes? Well, during the time that our relationship with the government was really strenuous, or should I say just we were in battle. We were essentially told to move to reservations. We were forced to reservations and sign treaties, as early as 1855, which the government then moved us to certain areas and basically consolidated their tribes into confederations, right, into those areas there. And so that's why you see some of the confederated tribes of Coos. There's more. This is not just one tribe. This is multiple tribes. There's multiple tribes here as well within those confederations. And so I think it honestly was just to group us, to keep us together, and do away with us, right? And we were put into these red areas, or all those reservation areas, and that's yes, tribal land, but you know what? This whole state was tribal land, but this is what happened, right? This is what I meant, what I mean when we were relocated to areas that were some of it was tribal land, some of it was not, and so in areas that we were told to stay. And I hear stories too about this happened across the nation, but I know specifically within the Klamath area, a lot of the Klamath people were not to leave that reservation area unless you had a pass. It was like high school. You had to have a pass to leave the reservation, and so it's things, it's history like that is certainly frustrating. I'm glad we moved away from, but that historical intergenerational trauma is still there. The relationship that was created is still there, and what I mean is the relationship between our tribal nations and the federal government, tribal nations and the states, tribal nations and organizations and businesses. We weren't always treated with compassion. We weren't always treated in a way where it helped us thrive. no, it was definitely tragic history, you know. At the same time, I also want to balance this out with saying that we had that historical intergenerational resilience. We also had that strength to endure, and why we're here today. You know, it is because we were to be extinct, right? We were supposed to be taken out. And so for us to be here today, I mean, it's a win, but there's a lot more that we need to do and that we need to work towards, which comes to this slide here of our challenges. And when I say our challenges, I'm a state employee, right? I work for Oregon Department of Human Services. And so, you know, within working in this system, I know and understand that it wasn't developed to serve tribal people or tribal nations. It wasn't embedded with tribal values or beliefs. So that's one of the things that we need to realize is the fact that, you know, our services aren't necessarily built to effectively serve tribal people. And so we must understand that. And you know, I think that some services will work, but we also must understand that there's a huge continuum when it comes to tribal people, and I say the continuum is for identity. Um, over the past, what we've gone through, you know, we've seen tribes and families, you know, sometimes embrace um, the mainstream values and just go that direction for survival, right? If we blend in, they won't bother us. If they blend in, they won't make fun of me. If we blend in, I won't be called out. You know, that there's that happens. But there's also, you know, the other identity continuum where you have the people that say, you know what, I'm native, I'm tribal. This is who I am. You can't get me to believe what you believe, and that's also freedom too, right? To have that expression. And so when you're working with different families, you might think about where are they on this continuum? You know, do they subscribe mostly to mainstream ideas, beliefs, you know, and are really just attuned to kind of the mainstream institution, you know, and but our native people, you know, tribal people, well, mainstream services might work with them. But if you also have on the other side, you also look at the other side of it. If you have tribal people that are very much embedded in their tribal values, their beliefs, their practices, their language, their ways of thought, maybe mainstream services are not going to work. And so that's where it also can, you have to sort of do that assessment, right? How you find out some of that information is, you know, tell me about yourself. You know, where did you grow up? You know, and so were you raised with tribal culture? You know, simple things like that. You know, and I probably wouldn't do much prying from there, but I mean that would at least give you an idea, because we have all Native people are not a monolithic, right? We all, some of us are very much traditional spiritual people. Like I said earlier, and when I offered that opening and blessing, some Native people just don't do that, you know. And some Native people would offer more of a religious prayer, you know, and that's fine as well. And so I think being able to assess where Native people and families are also on that continuum will help you out and be like, okay, this person probably is very, you know, tied to their culture. They're deeply rooted and connected to their culture. So maybe a mainstream practice or you know, something like that's not going to work. So I have to find maybe a Native organization maybe I can connect them with, or a resource. You know, I think that's one of the big things about being able to do good work is to be able to at least assess that. You may not get it right every time, but I think it is also good to be aware of how our identity has taken on different shapes, especially when it comes to living in modernity, living in an urban setting such as Portland, Oregon, or Salem, because that has happened. You know, you get Native people that just, they're Native, but you know what? I just don't practice. You know, that's who I am, but that doesn't define me. And then you get the other side of it too. being native defines me. That's all I practice, and so so again, just being able to do that assessment, I think is a big thing to certainly keep in mind as you're serving and engaging with tribal people. So it's not just a straightforward approach. And so that I think kind of goes into shifting our practice and approach. And so I've already kind of mentioned that about how we need to make that shift.
Adam, there's a comment in the chat bar that I think I could read for you that might be appropriate here, if you might want to comment on it. But
Sure.
Aubrey Ford is noting that there's a real stigma towards people who live on reservations, and that when she and her mom lived in Nevada near a reservation, that they would be stigmatized just for living near it by members of the community, and they would say rude things to them and scoff at them. But those, of course, who lived in or around the reservation showed a very different approach and were very open and had, close, tightly knit relationships. So that might play into this as well.
Yeah, it definitely will. I think just being able to listen to someone's story is the best thing you can do, right? And being able to then take that all in and reflect about, how do I serve this person? What are my next questions, right? After they're able to tell and talk about who they are, because I think when it comes to just talking and with someone face to face, you could learn a lot. And some of the strategies that I've used that are also within curriculums, such as the National Indian Child Welfare Association, is asking people open-ended questions, right? Tell me about yourself. And once people start talking, you look for themes, right, that might come up, that might lead you to mentioning other things. So if someone said, yeah, I live by, this big river was there, and so we always used to go to the river, and it's like, oh, well, yeah, what this river, can you describe it to me? That sort of thing. They always mention some of those themes and those reoccurring terms as well. That might be a way to help really peel back some of these layers, and really help and maybe understand what might also be important to them, and give you a clue, to kind of who they are and their story as well. And so but yeah, honestly, that stigma is still alive and well, right, in terms of reservations, in terms of those who might have a list because they speak their native language, right? It definitely grew up with that in my own hometown as well. Kids with long hair, boys with long hair, that's still stigmatized, right? There was this the news story about a teacher cutting a student's hair just because they thought that you shouldn't have it. And so there's so much there, but hopefully I at least address that, and we can have more discussion at the very end with time. But covering the myths and preconceived notions, I really feel that you need to come into this, go into a interaction or dialogue with Native peoples in a sense with no preconceived notions, of course, really open-minded, because everyone has their own story, right? Everyone has their own experience, and it's not the same. And I feel like, one thing to note though is the fact that the other side, our folks that we're serving, clients, customers, whatever way you want to call them, they're also thinking the same thing about us. Oh, you're the state, you want something from me. Oh, you're the state, you're going to deny me something, right? Oh, you're the state, so you're the authority, huh? So they're also having these myths and preconceived notions as well. And honestly, a lot of them are true because of what has happened historically, of kids being taken from communities, from nations that were from the state. that were from the federal government that looked like sort of us in a way in the white cars, that sort of thing, or look from like, oh, you're from the institution, okay, no, I don't want anything to do with you. And so know that, just how sometimes we on our end have those preconceived notions and those myths, they same thing. And they, our tribal people, have the same thing, and so for us to kind of come in being aware of that, but obviously not embodying any of that, and coming more of a place of understanding and of how you could help. How can you establish yourself as a helper? That's one of the best things you can do. And then sometimes for Native people, that might mean tangible things, that might mean, well, how can, you tell me what you might need? Because again, it's, for the most part, Native people have always been told what we need, how, what we should do with our lives. And so we were kind of dictated. And so just know that as well. And so I think that's the big thing that goes into the historical distrust. But to this day, we have Native peoples that say, you know what, I don't trust people from the state. I don't trust the government because of what happened, and for very good reason. But again, going back to establishing yourself as a helper, talking about your intentions when you work with Native people, is going to at least help, in terms of better engagement. And so that's, I at least wanted to provide some of those challenges, because these are big pieces that we're still working on today. And the power dynamics, again, going back to that authority, I feel in the 1950s, there was a law, Public Law 280, that basically was a part of the termination era. And so, yeah, if there was even more phases that impacted us, but the termination era of the 1950s thought to get rid of and sever the trust relationship that we had with tribes. And so basically the government was like, you know what, why have this responsibility to take care of tribes? Let's give it to the states. So we have that law here in Oregon to where we share concurrent jurisdiction with all but 3 tribes. And so sharing jurisdiction and this law is basically for tribes, for those that are under the public law. It's like you own a house, but your parents still tell you what to do. Imagine if you owned a house, like, yeah, I am a family owner, but your parents are like, you know what, hey, I want you home by 6. I want dinner on this time. You got to make sure you clean your room. Same thing here. The government, the state is still involved with tribes, and it almost seems like the sovereignty is quasi sovereign. Like, wait a minute, I thought tribes were all sovereign. Not so much. And so it is a very complex piece of legislation that puts us really not in a good position, but at the same time I feel like we could still serve our tribes and still respect sovereignty in a way. But I mentioned that again just to add the layers of those power dynamics to where how do we as a sovereign nation be autonomous when the state has jurisdiction? And so that's the power dynamics that we sometimes have to work with, which can be complex, but I want you to be aware of it, because again, just having this understanding and going into this relationship with a tribal person, knowing what has happened is going to help inform you moving forward. And so I just wanted to touch on that.
Adam, we do have a question about sovereignty. Would this be a good time to maybe field that, or do you want to wait till the end?
Sure.
So the question is nation status just for recognized tribes or all tribes?
It's for those federally recognized tribes that have treaties made with the United States federal government.
Thank you.
Going into the next slide here, the importance of tribal collaboration, I think, is obviously is understatement, right? I'd hope that you all consider this important work, especially what I mentioned in regards to the respect and the preservation and the protection of not only tribal sovereignty, but also to that kinship structure, because that also plays a part into upholding tribal sovereignty, raising our own children the way we want to we want them to be raised, within our tribal context. So sovereignty is a big piece as we continue to serve our tribal nations. Again, making it a point often to say tribal nations and not always tribal communities in some ways. And so even that departure with the language makes a difference, and so we have to treat them as such. Going into restoration and repairing of our relationship is something that is going to be ongoing. But I feel from what the exercise that you took away with earlier, you at least have an idea of what that feeling is like. Now, how we go about possibly repairing or restoring is going to be different. We all might play different roles. It might be a direct role where we're able to help a family, and really able to offer support in a way that is able to help them thrive. And I think also being mindful of that power, authority, or that power dynamic, to where we're not also saviors. No, let's get rid of all those movies, right? Those movie themes where there were white saviors for Native people in so many 90s movies. And so it's not that way anymore, and nor do Native people want that to be the way. It's like, how can we offer tribal people skills, tools, resources, so they can essentially help themselves? And so that role might all be different in a lot of ways. And I talked about delivering services in the context of tribal culture. It's holistic, taking in the mental, physical, spiritual, emotional pieces, but also tribally and culturally responsive. And of course, for us, as a state serving agency, or additional support for the family. There are going to be tribal families, that don't want anything to do with their own tribe, or might not, again, have good relationship with the tribe. And so that could be of contention, and you could say that's fine, but we can still help you. Yeah, we can still serve you, of course, because often at times what I hear is, well, you go to the tribe, then come to us. No, that's not how we provide services, as a state organization. That's and it's more of having that customer service mentality of like, how can we help you now, and doing that at what you can, before even saying like, oh, we can't help you because it's against policy, it's against this or that. I think that's where we may get involved, tribal affairs, because so many times I've heard where it's like, people are said, you have a tribe, well, go to them, have them help you. You got money, right? You guys have casinos. No, we have to say, how can I help you? Okay, how can I serve you? That sort of thing. And so I feel like sometimes that happens. I don't know why. But just again, we have to really shift, how we serve our tribal families out there. Okay. So partnership is early. Engage early, right? Reach out before you have any sort of fires, before you have any storms. I think this is something where we don't often hear from certain partners or offices or branches until something bad happens. And usually at that time it's really late to be able to develop relationships. And so being able to develop a relationship early on with our tribal communities is the best prevention, is prevention in a sense, of being able to ensure that you have an understanding, you have a relationship, you have a working relationship, right? What that looks like, especially if you are trying to establish something. And certainly consistency is the best, because if, again, tribes only see you when shit hits the fan, come on, that's just old hat right there. And of course the intentionality must come through, because if there is just a well, I have to do this, it's tribes are going to see right through that insincere approach. they're definitely going to see right through that. And then that's where the trust, the relationship goes downhill, because they're probably going to say, well, this is what's always happened to me. They lose hope in me, or something happens, and it's a very, sometimes can be a cynical attitude that tribal people have of the state or the government, or any other institution there. And so that's the best way to go about it, is just do it early enough, engage with tribes, start reaching out before you have a problem, before you even have a storm on your hands. And again, consistency and intentionality is makes all the difference, which goes hand in hand again with genuine, sincere. You can't fake it to make it when it comes to working with tribes or tribal engagement and relationship building. And so it definitely has to be very genuine in your outreach. Of course, ongoing, as I mentioned. I think I probably should have put this on the very top with the building rapport. That's really where it starts, right? Because relationships are focal points of how Indian country works, of how we get things done, and is of great value for tribal people. And so the relationships doesn't happen automatically either. Don't expect tribes or any tribal family to say, oh, you're from the state, oh, okay, okay, good. They're not going to automatically provide, they probably provides respect, but they're not. You have to really work at it in developing a relationship, because the first couple of times you might not even talk about maybe needs, or just you have to sign these papers. It might just all be rapport building, so that they know that you're not there just to steal something or to extract something there, but you're there to in sincerity, to help, to support, to be a helper, and which then comes the trust. So that how you do that sometimes is over food, is over informal events, some things that are outside of our office settings as well, in the community, going to them. And so when we did have communal events, but now it's still we're kind of coming back, but I mean that's what is preferred, because the face-to-face, physical, like in the room type of interactions will never be replaced for tribal people. The virtual space, yes, will do, because it's safe, it's protection for right now. But I mean, when we get back to it, tribes always would love to see people in person. And really you'll get so much kudos if you show up in person. So that's what I also want to mention. The inclusiveness, I think it also goes back to being a part of conversations early on, not just being tokenized or when we need you, so being mindful of that. Obviously, transparency, pretty straightforward. And when it comes to, well, let's bring the tribe in, because, why beat around the bush? Just tell them why. Just tell them, hey, this is what we're going through, and just being full disclosure of what's going on and what we have, obviously in a respectful way, not being overly blunt or anything, but transparency is the best way to go. Not hiding information or hiding intentions from tribes, because again, that's what's happened in the past to us, and that's how people still don't have trust for the government or the state. The flexibility piece too is huge, and when it comes to our work environments, or at least just some of those expectations, it's just different, and so definitely providing that flexibility for our tribal people will, help, things that, knowing that I guess the imperfections is okay, and it happens, and that's something that just occurs, and tribal people know that happens. And so that's sometimes why we need that flexibility to be able to just work with you. And so tribal people will definitely appreciate that. The last piece should be straightforward: get comfortable being uncomfortable. Definitely don't let that fear of, I'm going to mess up, I might say the wrong thing, hold you back. Don't let that hold you back, and just say, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, or I don't know what you're referring to. Can you help me understand? Can you help me get a better idea of what you're explaining, and being able to approach it that way of help me understand, because it is much more compassionate. then maybe saying, why are you doing that? That doesn't make sense. That's stupid. And that's where we shut down. Boom. Native people often shut down from that. And so I think that that's at least just a tip in terms of being able to, if you get uncomfortable, don't know some things, you can ask, and be able to get out of that comfort zone and be able to, be curious about that. Communication patterns, I feel I probably will mention here with the humor, is that's one thing that is something that we've helped us, I think, get through a lot of the trauma, so much that we've gone through, that our humor is something we often use and just, as a part of our lifestyle and almost a coping mechanism in some ways, and so if a Native person starts to joke around with you, that's a great thing, that's a really good thing, but also don't tell jokes right away, because it could be a little too early. But just know that the humor, the incorporation of humor, once you have that established relationship, definitely is good rapport building. Visiting, the art of visiting, that rarely happens these days, right? When it comes to talking to people, we just, do this. That's it. And so, our Native people, again, value that, of just being able to, hey, what's going on? How's the weather? Yeah. How's your family? Yeah, that man, the simplicity in that is can go a long way. And then the tell me more piece, as I mentioned with the themes, the reoccurring things, you hear things and some people say, and you say, hey, tell me more about this river you're mentioning. Tell me more about this grandmother that you talked about. You'll start to see folks see the layers get pulled back there. With the speech, making sure that it is not too fast, right? And the words are not too big, as well as paying attention to the nonverbal, in regards to talking straight face to face is probably not ideal. It's more of kind of talking from the side or something like that, or because I think when you kind of go face to face, it's like are you looking for like a tussle or something? And so it might make the wrong impression, or just might give off something, that energy you don't want to have. And so more of maybe like a side, if you were to be in person, right? And the response piece too, you have sometimes Native people that will take their time responding, meaning that if there is a pause, it's not a bad thing. If you ask a question, it's a pause, that doesn't necessarily mean they didn't hear you. They could be thinking about it, right? They could be finding the words to offer. And so making sure that you're not also interrupting, and making sure that you're aware of like, okay, that's their speech pattern. They just take some time before responding. And that I don't interrupt, especially if you interrupt elders. Yeah, it's very disrespectful in our traditions. And sometimes you might get a response through story, and of being able, and I think this is the patience and flexibility that we need to have as well, because the fact that our Native people sometimes reveal information, reveal facts that you want to know through their storytelling, and so that it might happen that way. And so I would refrain from saying, where's the story going, or what's the story about? I don't want to hear and so just know that that could occur as well. And the language, of course, not too big of a language, and staying strengths based as well. But I will stop there and end on the fact that, again, it's for us as Native people, it's always about planning that next generation. You see the child here that we're always thinking about, that we're always trying to preserve, to make sure that there is access, there is that connection to culture, that we're helping to maintain that culture. And we're playing a role, however, also tribes want us to play, or our tribal families want us to play, right? If we can play play a main role, hey, that's great, let's do it. But also if tribes or tribal people need just maybe you to play this or do this, that might be good as well. And so I just think that we can be able to continue to pick up those pieces, from the exercise earlier, and really help put that together, so that we all can thrive as a state and as Oregonians and tribal nations. So I will stop there and open it up for questions.
I do have one question, Adam. I'm going to go ahead and read out from Josie DeMarco. And she says that most social workers aren't uncomfortable engaging with people from varied backgrounds. But honestly, she thinks she knows more about many Middle Eastern nations, China, even the Vikings of old, than about Indian nations and tribes that share, her own country. So why is it that Americans know so little about Native Americans?
That's a good question. I think you just start with the K through 12 system, and you also start with our media. You don't see us out there. You don't. I mean, there definitely is a revitalization, or at least just a movement to certainly embed more education on Native peoples. But I honestly, it's just frustrating, yeah, because there's not a higher demand for it.
Well, I don't know if you can see the chat, but Aubrey is also pointing out that it seems like a lot of countries and cultures, including our own, try to wipe out the bad parts of our history and the negative things that have happened. And if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So if we want to do better, what recommendations do you have for us? How can we turn this tide? How can we change things?
Yeah, follow the slideshow that I made.
Oh, I'm off mute. I was just going to say Katie is unmuted.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask you a question. It's fairly specific, but I have a few people that I work with that are from the Warm Springs tribe. And I guess what I was kind of curious about is the best way to navigate the system, because their system is very different from ours. And I have one person in particular that I'm really trying to get him some assistance. I have a lady that's from the Bureau of Indian Affairs who's telling me, you need to do this and you need to do this. And I try to do the things that she says, and I'm not successful. And that's largely because I'm calling people at the tribe and I don't know who to speak to. So I just call whatever the random phone number is. And I say, I'm helping this gentleman and I'm trying to prevent, homelessness and these other things from happening. Who do I talk to for assistance? And I don't know if it's because I'm not within like the tribe, or I don't know. I get passed around a lot, but I never get answers. And so I don't know. My biggest thing is like, I want to make sure that all of my clients, including my Native clients, are well cared for and have what they need, which is, food, shelter, warmth, all the things that they need. And I find working with the tribe is the most difficult because I don't know how to navigate the system, and I'm not really offered any help to navigate the system. So I guess I'm just kind of wondering what's the best way to go about doing that, because I definitely want to help, and I don't know if I'm not coming across as genuine or what.
It might start with if you know someone from the tribe, or making that connection first, because I think the relationship piece, like I said, is big. We don't know you. Sometimes it is a bit tougher to connect if there's no relationship, right? And so I think that would be my recommendation, is to be able to connect with someone you might know, or maybe a colleague that knows of someone that could help make that connection and that relationship. That could help and be a start. If you still are failing, or not, just unsuccessful in those areas there, I mean, certainly tribal affairs can also assist as well. I mean, we have established relationships also with all the tribes in Oregon.
Okay. And this gentleman actually has a guardian who lives on the reservation and very well known, but I feel like she may not even be willing to go forward and help me in that respect. Same thing, the relationship building. Really, I like her a lot. I just am not sure what she can offer, but I appreciate that. Maybe that's what I need to try. Thank you.
Adam, we have a request in chat for if you have any recommendations of where folks can learn more about tribal nations.
Maybe I could offer just some resources to this group. I could pass it on just for a resource. I mean, there's so many books out there. I think I was trying to look for a book around here. Let me think about that one, because I know there is, but I just right offhand I can't think of one as of
Okay.
right now. So
I have another one we can move on to, and this is from Glenna Hayes. And Glenna says, when people talk about critical race theory being taught in schools, is this something that they would include? I know a lot of time when we talk about racism, we leave out Indigenous history.
it certainly can be a part of it. The one separation that tribal people have, tribal nations, is that political status. We have those treaties, so we're not just a part of that critical race theory discussion. We also have government to government relationships. There is a public Senate Bill 770, which was created in the early 2000s within the state legislature, basically mandated that all state agencies work and receive consultation or consult with our Oregon 9 tribes when it comes to state programming. And so that again, we are able to be inclusive, we are able to respect the tribal sovereignty, and also possibly have the integration of culture within the services that we are creating. And so there definitely is a lot of those elements there, but I would say yes.
And I also want to note, there were a couple of comments really appreciating the holistic approach to interacting with tribal members. And also noted how beneficial it would be if we kind of took that holistic approach to supporting everyone and think beyond just physical and medical health, and look at cultural and spiritual health as well.
Yeah, one thing I'm working with with Missy Elliott and Caitlin on is a FAQ just about how we could serve our tribal people and engage with tribal communities. So if you have ideas as well, submit them to folks, submit them to those two of your colleagues there, because we definitely want to provide that support, right? Because but we also want people to do it in a very sincere, respectful way, and so we're here to help. And so, and again, I can pass those resources on when it comes to, more areas to learn. And I saw Elizabeth is talking. Hey, Liz, she suggested is taking a drive on the reservation. Yeah, attend community events, powwows and cultural events. Definitely something, if they are held, that's one of the best ways to learn too, is just to be able to observe, experience it, and be in it, as opposed to just reading a book.
I know we're almost out of time. We have just one more comment in reaction to Elizabeth's suggestion is, how do we know it's appropriate to just show up on a reservation? That sounds disrespectful.
But I would say, yeah, definitely tinted windows, unmarked. Yeah, I think, yeah. Liz, can you come off mute and answer?
Okay, so I would just suggest it comes back to having that relationship. If you know somebody that is in the tribe, having that conversation with that individual to see if it would be appropriate to go to a cultural event. Powwows are pretty universal, so those are always open to everybody. When it comes to cultural events specifically, so in Warm Springs, we have a Huckleberry Feast, we have a Salmon Feast. And so although the majority of individuals that attend our specific cultural event are the tribal members, it doesn't mean that non-native people couldn't come along with, who you might know. So like my husband, who is non-native, he would go with me. And so that would be appropriate that he would be there with me because of the relationship that we have. Or if any of my non-native friends were to say, hey, Liz, there's the Salmon Feast coming up. Can I go with you? It comes back to just a relationship that you establish with somebody within the tribe.
Thank you, Liz.
Well, I just wanted to close and just say thank you so much for this opportunity. Hopefully it just builds a base and at least, wanting to learn more. And I think what I'll do is send the organizers more resources so that you can continue your journey exploring and making those connections and relationships. And I do appreciate all of your help and support when it comes to serving our tribal people. As I mentioned, there's a lot of reasons, so many reasons, right, of being able to serve our tribal people, upholding our government to government relationship, of making sure that there is sovereignty there, but also the healing, the repair, reducing harm, the not to re-traumatize, right? Those are things that we could consciously make a choice on, of ensuring that doesn't happen again, right? Not repeating history. We have that opportunity now, and so hopefully some of what I offered is able to help you inform your practice. And so let me know if you have any questions, and again, thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you everyone for your time today. I will email out the resources that Adam mentioned. Thank you all.